Voters are still getting used to August primaries after years of post-Labor Day elections. Turnout projected to be only about 15% Tuesday. But there are still a number of interesting and important contests. There's a Democratic primary for Attorney General, the Republican primary in the 6th Congressional District, and the Milwaukee County Sheriff's race. Here for some pre-primary conversation, our upfront pundit panel, John Nichols, associate editor of the Cap Times and correspondent for The Nation, and Christian Schneider, columnist for the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. Gentlemen, good to have you back on the program again.
Pleasure.
Let's talk about the statewide contest,
Yeah.
the Democratic primary for Attorney General. John Nichols, what are you hearing? It seems like John Richards has been out working it hard. Is that going to be enough?
Well, it's interesting. We live in a new world of politics. Historically, in a Wisconsin AG's primary, and we have had a lot of them going back for decades, historically, the way to get in was to start early, go to every county, get every union you can get, build a grassroots organization, and that's exactly what John Richards has done, pretty ambitiously. The challenge, though, is that in a very low turnout primary, and one where the candidates are not well known, there is the possibility that a lot of money on TV at the last minute could be a big factor. And if that is, then Happ, Susan Happ, the candidate from Jefferson County, the DA there, she could well close that gap, because it's clear that she has a substantial amount of resources to go in hard at the end. The third
Emily's List, other groups who have come
yeah,
out
and
AFSCME.
And also, it is notable that I would suggest this, that within the Democratic Party, folks who are very, very concerned about getting just the right candidate for that spot, I think have put some energy behind her.
I want to switch to another race that's getting an awful lot of attention. Christian is a more conservative voice here, address that. The 6th Congressional District, East Central Wisconsin. Pretty hot primary there. What do you see heading into Tuesday night?
Yeah, well, you've got three main candidates, and all of them, are in the state legislature right now. And for the most part, 99% of the votes, they're all going to take, the same vote. So it really comes down to an issue of kind of temperament. And you've got Dewey Strobel, who's a state representative, who's really gone on the offensive the last few weeks, trying to knock down the other candidates. And it kind of seems like that might actually backfire on him, because
sort of the way Mark Newman
right.
One attack on Governor Walker, or then candidate Walker.
Right, but if you're in third place, I mean, that's kind of what you have to do. Then you've got Glenn Grothman, who, let me put it this way, there's nobody smarter or more conservative or harder working in the state legislature than Glenn Grothman. But there's also nobody as maybe prone to go off message, to put it nicely, more prone to say something that the party is going to have to distance themselves from. So he's really a wild card in that regard. And then you have Joe Leibham, who's a state senator. Right. He's represented the largest part of that district. People are there kind of used to voting for him. And if there were a factory where they made Republican candidates, Joe Leibham would drop straight out of that factory. I mean, he's perfect for that district. But the question is, with the other two taking shots at him so much, how much is that going to erode his lead?
John Nichols, briefly, Democrats are watching this race. That's a conservative district. Mark Harris, the Democratic candidate, is a bright guy, but that's an uphill battle. How closely are they watching what happens on Tuesday?
I think they're watching it closely because in fairness, I think they have one candidate they'd like to see come through, and that would be Glenn Grothman. Christian summed up that Glenn, who I happen to think is exactly as Christian said, one of the more thinking and interesting members of the legislature, but he's not always on message. He's said a lot of things historically that are controversial, and I think
lend themselves to TV ads.
Right, and so I think then Democrats will look at that race, but remember, this is a tough year for Democrats. They've got a lot of other contests, so Mark Harris, the Democrat up there, would have to make a very powerful case, and frankly, Glenn would probably have to say something in his victory speech that was particularly controversial.
What else should we be looking for on Tuesday night? Give us an example of another race that's caught your attention.
Well, one in the Republican circles is the primary for the 21st Senate District. It used to be just Racine County, but now it's broken up into essentially just a GOP district.
So
where you have
Stites and Wangard race.
Stites and Wangard. Wangard, of course, was in the legislature, voted for Scott Walker's reforms, and was recalled as a result of it. Stites ran against Bob Wirtz, lost in a primary back in 2012. Stites is kind of positioning himself as kind of the more conservative candidate, but in that district, Wangard's trying to make the case to say, well, hey, wait a minute, I supported Scott Walker knowing I was going to lose my job, and because I was too conservative, now you can't say I'm not conservative enough. So that's, it's one of those races where people who are normally friends are at each other's throats, so it's gotten really personal. But yeah, I think Weingart probably sneaks through that one.
Briefly, John, other races that are catching your eye?
Sure, I think it's very possible that the lead story on Wednesday morning is the Milwaukee County Sheriff's race. Sheriff Clark, running for re-election, facing a pretty serious primary challenge. We don't have a lot of prominent African-American officials, county officials in Wisconsin. We have Ishel Zan over in Dane County running for AG, and then we have David Clark, who's a national figure. But he has really seen a hard hit from his opposition here, and the key there is going to be a question of whether, I think, a new generation of African-American officials, people like Mandela Barnes, who are very active in this primary, can swing some neighborhoods against David Clark. If they do, it's possible he gets beat.
Quick question about the governor's race here. A lot of talk about outsourcing, a lot of talk about Mary Burke's wealth. Why is this being done? What is this about, and is it working?
Well, if you look at the polls, half the state still kind of doesn't even know who Mary Burke really is. So before she can define herself, there's been a rush to define her as this, out-of-touch rich lady. I don't know that the outsourcing or the offshoring issue is really making that big of a dent. Walker says, well, it's really an issue of hypocrisy, that she's paying people in China $2 an hour to make her bikes, and that's how she got her wealth, and that, now she wants to raise the minimum wage, that type of stuff.
Wisconsin's been brutalized by free trade. We have lost our auto plant Kenosha. We've lost our auto plant in Janesville. We've lost parts plants across this state. The industries of this state, which people grew up with, have been badly harmed by an unthinking free trade policy. It crosses lines of partisanship and lines of ideology. It's a great issue. Unfortunately, it doesn't work very well in the hands of a candidate who doesn't believe what he's saying. Scott Walker is a militant supporter of free trade, and so he is the worst messenger, and it looks like he's attacking a company that at least decided to keep some of its operations and its headquarters in Wisconsin. Very, very bad misstep by the governor.
All right, Christian Schneider, the columnist from the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, conservative columnist. John Nichols from the Cap Times, not so conservative. Thanks to both of you for being with us. And still ahead, a look at the primary contest featuring some of the biggest personalities and the biggest opportunities to make history.
For complete results of primary races around the state, you can turn to our editorial partner, WizPolitics.com.